231 Public Law 1975 entitled Open Public Meetings Act. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided as specified in the Act. Proper notice of this public meeting was provided in the notice of May 9, 2011. Said notice was posted at the entrance of the Board of Education offices, mailed to the Nutley Sun, Star Ledger, the North Jersey Herald News, and the Nutley Journal. Mailed to the Nutley Township Clerk, advertised in the Nutley Sun on May 19, 2011, posted on the district website. This is an official meeting. Please stand for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll, please.
Here. Ms. Flynn? Here. Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Dr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Mrs. Russo?
Here.
Mrs. Scalera?
Here.
Mr. Scazzato?
Here.
Mr. Pilson?
Here. It gives me pleasure to introduce Mr. Berry, principal of the high school, to make a presentation of student awards.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's our pleasure to present some awards to our outstanding achieving students. I'm going to start with the students who've been commended in the National Merit Scholarship Program. These students have been recognized for being in the top 2% of the over 1 million students who took the SATs in the fall of their junior year. And we'll start with Mr. Williams, would you be kind enough to give out the photographs and the certificates? And parents, thank you for coming to support your children tonight. We're glad you're able to make it. Ashish Aman. Anna Goiter. Wahid Hashwan. Bijon Kim. Jared Lynn. And Amanda Zhao. We have one student who's been recognized as a semi-finalist in the program, and she's eligible to continue competing for a National Merit Scholarship. And this student places in the top 1% of the students who took the test nationally, Kimberly Liu. I want to thank Mrs. DeVillio for quickly providing photographs so that the students had a memento, and Mrs. DeVillio will now present the AP Scholar Awards.
The AP program offers several AP Scholar Awards to recognize high school students who have demonstrated college-level proficiency through the AP exams. This year we have 7 students who each achieved one of 3 different levels of the award. The AP Scholar is granted to students who receive 3 or higher on 3 or more AP exams. The recipients this year are Ashish Aman, Bijon Kim, and Kimberly Liu. The AP Scholar with Honor is granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.25 on all AP exams taken and scores of 3 or higher on 4 or more of these exams. Kush Desai. And Amanda Zhao are our recipients. And finally, AP Scholar with Distinction is granted to students who receive an average score of at least 3.5 on all exams taken and a score of 3 or higher on 5 or more exams. This year, Vahid Hashman,
I want to thank the board and Mr. Lasvik for this opportunity to let us recognize our outstanding students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Next on the agenda is a presentation by the superintendent, Mr. Leslie, on the superintendent's goals.
Thank you, Mr. President. The board and I have been working on these goals pretty much since I came in. I think they had in mind for me what these would be before they even hired me. Looking ahead to the future, basically based with the new code, superintendent's contract, we're required to have up to 5 merit goals. And we talked about what those are and how those come about. But we're also required, once we receive approval from the Executive County Superintendent on those goals, to make a public presentation of those goals and to the board and to the board to vote on them. So this is that presentation. There is no map for how to write these. They've never been done before. And so I've actually fleshed out a lot more language than you may have seen in some of the other public presentations working with the Executive County Superintendent, but really trying to convey what the board wants to achieve by writing these goals. And so again, the idea behind these goals is that it focuses the direction of my work and therefore the work of the district based on something that's specific and measurable, so that we're always moving toward a very specific vision and we can determine how well we are or are not doing our jobs. 3 of the goals of the 5 have to be quantitative. That means they have to be numbers-based. You're looking for measuring something in number form. Those things can be pretty much anything the board wants to focus on. And we'll talk about what the state actually wants to use in a little bit. The other 2 are qualitative. They lend themselves far more to the job of the superintendent. At the same time, they are more of the quote-unquote touchy-feely. They're not measured numerically, they're measured substantively. They're looking for change, whether it's policy, practice, procedure, some kind of shift in culture. But the qualitative goals are made to measure those kinds of efforts superintendent leads. The quantitative goals specifically, I'm going to share all the goals with everyone. But this being the first time with being a lot of focus on the state level, what the goals should be, they were very particularly prescribed. The Executive County Superintendents were made known that they should only include certain specific goals. So what you're going to see is basically what we've been asked to write as our goals. And again, they do fall in line with what the board wants to focus on, which is first and foremost student achievement and how we measure student achievement. As I said, they were directed by the Executive County Superintendent, and they do focus on student performance, but they are fairly standard for what you would see across the state now for new superintendent's contracts and merit goals. They focus specifically in 3 areas. The first is language arts performance, the second is mathematics performance, and the third is greater numbers or greater percentages of students performing in the advanced proficient category. As you can see, it is state test driven. They are using these goals, the state, to focus our investigation on state test performance, the work of our students on the ASK and the HASPA, as well as the biology and algebra tests, and how we're moving from year to year toward greater levels of performance. Again, the goals themselves focus on a cohort or language agency year over year. What that means is, in order to handle the idea of mobility with different students being in a district from one year to the next, what they try and do is measure performance of like students. So students that were here last year compared to their performance last year to those students that are still here compared to that performance. And so we have to be very particular when we present out these results, because we're not talking about the numbers that are generally publicized as district performance. Because from one year to the next, you're not talking about the same pool of students. We have to disaggregate that data and then the presentation on one year to the next, and that's what we see in language goals. First goal is language arts specific. And again, this is state language and does fall in line with what the board wants to do, which is to see an increase in overall performance. The 3 performance ratings in the state test are partially proficient, proficient, and advanced proficient. In shorthand, partially proficient is not meeting standard. Proficient is what we expect a student to perform in a given content area at a specific grade level. And advanced proficient means that student is exceeding those general expectations. So again, my task as superintendent is to work with administrators, faculty, and staff to direct resources toward teaching and learning in a manner that induces a year-over-year, that's that cohort language, 5% reduction in the number of students performing in the Part 2 proficient range on state assessments, going from last year's state assessments 3.7 to this current year's state assessments 40. And this is specific to language arts. You're going to see that quantitative goal 2 is exactly the same with a change to mathematics. They want to focus out so that they can see where districts are being successful and where they're struggling. Everything you'll see comes directly from the executive county superintendent. This is what they are looking for. The other one is a little bit more exciting. Still looking for a 5% shift, but we're looking to take students who performed either proficient or partially proficient last year to the advanced proficient level. And so we're shifting 5% of those students from either the first two categories into the third, and it's an aggregate total for both language arts and math across the tested areas, grades 3-7 last year and grades 4-8. It is very number specific. It is blatant. We just aggregate the data, and there really is no gray area with these three goals. The qualitative goals are where we have a little bit more fun. These were based on work we started off with the board retreat. And then the two things you heard me speak of before, the first being common vision, the second being common language. Our common vision goal really is strategic planning. Strategic planning is a process where an organization gets together and defines who it wants to be, takes a hard look at where it is, and maps out a plan to move from the second to the first. It's my job as a superintendent to work with the board and our administrators, faculty, staff, and community members to build a full strategic plan. So that any decision that the board makes, that the building administrators make, that teachers make, we fall in line with one specific vision. The idea behind this, again, is we're in the social sector. It becomes sometimes difficult to measure our success, which again is what these goals are about, because we don't have a bottom line like industry does. At the end of the day, we don't add up the pluses and subtract the minuses and see if I became ahead. We're building people. We make kids. We turn them into young adults who are eager and ready to go out and achieve their own goals. And it's difficult sometimes to measure that success. What has been found through research is that successful social sector organizations measure that success against a very specific mission plan. And you need one in order to do that. So part of strategic planning to develop that. So through the course of this year, we'll be working with all stakeholders to create this common vision. It's a long endeavor. They map out about a year for strategic planning, and we're already a little bit behind the eight ball. It's October, so we'll be moving rapidly. I'll talk a little bit more about the schedule in the superintendent's report, but the idea being that it's managing a lot of moving pieces to get everyone on one common vision. The most important piece of a strategic plan is that every person in the organization, parent, student, custodian, board member, faculty member, administrator, at whatever level, understands what he or she can do within his or her role to move the district toward their specific vision. There are a number of components that we fleshed out in the goal. These have to be presented specifically. Start with the core values, what we value, and analysis of where we are. And that starts and ends with data. Developing a mission statement, which our high school is moving through right now. Part of the middle stage process, and I think they will attest the difficulty in how the difficulty that exists in writing what can be one or two short sentences. It is very difficult to describe who you want to be in 2 sentences. A vision statement. Vision being a definition of what we think the school district in today's society should be. From those two, when you combine them, you develop specific goals by taking the analysis and measuring against your definition of who you want to be and how you want to get there. And those specific goals become our targets for work. Those goals have to have a timeline. They can't be strictly open-ended. We hold ourselves accountable to our stakeholders. Those goals need distractions and certain limits, things that we are agreeing not to do to make sure that we'll be successful. All these have to be presented as part of a cohesive strategic plan, and the idea is that we will work through the strategic process throughout this year, and then by the end of the academic year, we'll make a presentation to the Board of Education and to all of our public stakeholders of our successful strategic plan. This is the actual text of the goal. All this will be up online. But again, manage your strategic planning initiative that will come in by the end of the academic year. The presentation of the complete strategic plan, if you want to know the definition complete, it's that previous slide. All of those pieces that can guide us over the next 5 years. Second goal is common language. This is rapidly underway as it is. We came in and everyone I spoke to talked about teaching and learning. We talk about how we need a common language so that we can move our instruction forward, our professional practice forward. We've already started this at the district level. We kicked off the year with this. Faculty, staff, administrators have been involved in this common language process. It's been clear that educators, something that many districts lack, which is this idea of a clear and articulated, specific and consistent language by which we can talk about what we do and how well we do it. Other professions have it. Whether it's medicine, accounting, architecture, they all have this, and it helps us certify what we're doing and how well we're doing. Without that, we can't function as specific. That's one whole thing. We function as pieces, but we never see the full potential of some of our parts. We're working with what we call framework. Framework is a continual performance in each area of professional practice, so that we can look at something and describe how well that performance, how well that professional actually performed within their specific role, so that we can start to measure and then, more importantly, grow. Having this language is critical. We focused on 3 things so far, and in this order of importance. And when we talk about common language and professional practice, you get the word evaluation, which usually has a negative connotation. Really trying to turn that on its head. A lot of times the conversation in the media is about accountability. Accountability is certainly part of the common language framework, but it's the third in importance of the 3 core pieces, those being professional growth, what you can see and measure, professional learning, that which an individual is growing internally, and then accountability. Our focus has been on that, and our conversations have been around that. Professional growth first, professional learning second, and certainly accountability third. Components of this specific goal: clearly defined framework, specific process so that we are consistent and collaborative. We're moving to the clinical model so that we are making sure we have conversations before, during, and after any what in the past has simply been called evaluation. For us, it's about the learning. Same things we hold for our students, we need to hold for ourselves, and that's what this process is about. Turning our annual review to make it more specific of our goals. If we have large mission and large goals, knowing what a secretary or a principal or individual teacher in a specific content area at a specific level can and should have done to move the district toward those goals. We need to write them down. We need to hold ourselves accountable for meeting those goals. And we need to look at them honestly and say, how close did we get and what can we do better next year? It's about bringing together the entire district collaboratively. A direct connection to the professional development that we offer, whole group, small group, level specific, individually to teachers, to administrators, based on the needs that they demonstrate as we use the common framework. There has to be a system that we use to collect and analyze the data that any system of evaluation produces. And finally, make sure that we're reporting out publicly to the board where we see ourselves when it comes to common language and what we see our next steps to be. So that we're always on the same page, and most importantly, we can direct our resources in that direction. And again, the text of the common language qualitative goal number 2, that by the end of the academic year, we're presenting the full new evaluation system, and by presenting, we've been building that collaboratively, working with teachers and faculty, staff, administrators in different roles to make sure that the framework is appropriate and what we want it to be here in Nutley. We want to make sure that we're congruent with the up-to-date current state recommendations. Again, short story, coming in as a new superintendent, we're approached by a number of groups and working with our association. They were adamant that we go forward and try to apply for the grant that the state is offering. And the best piece that came out of this year, because I will get as much mileage out of the state as I possibly can, was that they looked at me and said, even if we don't get the grant, we're going to do this, yes. And for me, that's exactly the kind of place I want to work at. Those are people that are courageous and they want to move forward and grow professionally. So that's why we're trying to keep this a collaborative piece. There'll be a report to the Board of Education on the implementation of the system, finds the data, and exactly where we plan to go next year. I know I'm talking about 5 merit goals for the superintendent. Public presentation, again, they will find their way to the website for tomorrow. Any questions from the board? Just as a brief, so everyone's aware, we have been talking about this in our committees. We've been working on them collaboratively throughout. If there are any final questions about the goals?
I just think that we're all, I'll speak for my committee, we're happy to see us moving forward like this. We know that those goals are out there. We know what the agenda was. It's good to see a presentation like this and let the citizens know what we already know ourselves, that we're moving in the right direction.
And I want to, Mr. Superintendent, commend you for the job you've done. You've certainly kept us all in the loop, certainly brought this district together, so thank you. Good job.
Like comment, you alluded to in the opening remarks about the search for new superintendent, probably had goals in mind, and I think that this is very consistent with what we did have in mind when we were in the superintendent search, and congratulations for that.
I wanted to just say thank you very much, but again, writing goals was step 1.5. Looking to work together with everybody here and make them a reality, so we'll put as much effort toward meeting the goals as we did to putting them together. So thank you for your great job.
Just take a short recess. The students who got their awards, we congratulate them, and I know they probably have schoolwork, studies to do and stuff like that, so they don't have to endure the rest of the meeting. But I thought that it might be good if you heard the superintendent's goal. So we'll take that 5-minute break. Resume the meeting. Next presentation, and by Mr. Lazovic, on the electronic violence and vandalism.
Promise this won't be typical for all board meetings. All public school districts are required in the month of October to hold public hearing. Reviewing last year's report of all the acts of violence and vandalism which occurred during the school year each year. In addition, we're also required to designate the 3rd week of October as School Violence Awareness Week, plus we respect through new legislation. During this week, we provide an opportunity for students, parents, and the school district to couple with law enforcement and other outside stakeholders to discuss methods for keeping schools safe from violence, and to create school safety plans and recognize students in need of help. Let me begin by actually presenting some of the things that we're doing here in district before we actually get to the numbers. October 3rd through 7th is definitely week of respect. Of course, there's anti-bullying bill of rights. School districts throughout the state are working. We've done a number of things here at the district level. We've broken these up. Again, this presentation will find its way to our main website, so you can go through again. But in general, at the elementary level, we've gotten our cases buildings together. At different levels, we have teachers come up with age and developmentally appropriate activities, whether it's showing video, having a conversation, or having an enforcement come in. It's getting kids to talk. Very much a believer that if you want to teach with somebody, you want to learn to talk. It's the idea of trying to get these students to interact with each other and learn so that when they're put into a real-life situation, they have an opportunity to use that learning to act appropriately. In every level, one of the things that we do in our media centers is our media specialists are highlighting specific literature in very conspicuous areas so that students see that there are resources for them. They can go to those resources, both when they have the need or for any reason preemptively, so that they're being proactive in learning about it ahead of time. One of the big pieces is that we do morning PA announcement. One of the things I want to share at Lincoln School, the students at Lincoln School got together and put together a public service announcement to videotape it, and that actually was shared with all of the basic buildings being shown. So again, we now have our students kind of showing competency and getting out there and building usable real-life tools to teach themselves and others. So that's very exciting. We did focus on the 3 C's of respect throughout the district: caring, courtesy, and consideration. At the 4-6 level, things like the respect card, when we're getting people together and talking about acts of respect and having them represent those acts physically through artwork in the rest, and then displaying those so that other students can see them, talk about them, other teachers can connect with students from other classes. And again, trying to use similar language: self-respect, responsibility, empathy, tolerance, and make those words have meaning to kids at their individual level. Whether that's a 3rd grader or kindergarten or a high school student, what does tolerance mean? What does it look like? Why is it important? So we have those conversations. At the middle school and again at the high school, of course, digital consciousness. Current world, we have to be very conscious that the digital media and the digital world allows for any number of ways for people to be bullied, for vandalism to occur, for any kind of, the idea of ethics has changed as social media has grown, as technology continues to advance. Again, we've made multiple announcements. We've had speakers come in at this level, and there's one specific classroom activity that they've given all social studies students called Who Am I? It's about diversity, trying to make us not necessarily aware, and therefore hopefully more able to act ethically and morally, given any situation. High school activities, again, of course, digital consciousness. Reverend Mike Fallon come in, who is an extremely dynamic speaker, has been all over the country, coming telling his own personal story and a way that engages students in thinking about their personal stories. Again, announcements regularly with specific themes. We have an Internet Safety Club. A candlelight vigil was actually held at the high school. And again, the media specialists doing a great job of highlighting all pertinent literature, level specific. To the front stuff. Things we need to talk about. The state requires that we report into certain categories, and those categories are very catchy names, like weapons. It needs to be understood that there's a whole description behind each of these categories, and a weapon can be anything used in a threatening manner. It does not mean that exactly. It could be a pen, it could be a chair, it could be a piece of paper in the hands of the right person who knows. A pointed stick, things like that. The idea is that intent determines whether or not something is always not a weapon. As you can see, these numbers, again, they're an aggregate total, and you may have one instance of violence or vandalism that included both violence, vandalism, and possibly a weapon, or substance abuse and vandalism. And so the numbers don't always add up as you read it down, because you can have multiple, or one event actually having multiple categorizations. So again, our numbers from 2009 to 2010, violence, we had 31 documented incidents. In 2010-11, there were 53. Vandalism was 4, and in 2010-11, it was 10. But this is again across the district. Weapons, and I'm required to say this. Weapons are 3 last year, 4 this year, and our substance abuse we held steady at 9 documented incidences in both years. Also required to break down categories by school. And rather than read through these, what we will do is post this again on the website so that anyone interested can examine the different schools. And again, as you see, what we do is we put the 09-10 data right next to the 2010-11 data. And again, our totals for the district, again, difficult to, this comes out of the state reporting device. We use an online system where we enter as incidents occur. And it's a way for the district to just keep tabs on how things are going. Our big push with this, the whole idea behind EBDRS is instruction. It's looking at keeping this information to see what's going on in the district, figure out what we can do educationally to lower these numbers, to deal with the instances that create an episode with a weapon or an episode of violence. It's all about instruction, always about teaching. Course of action taking. And again, these numbers, there are specific categories, and a lot of times things do not fall in, but as you can see, out-of-school suspension was our #1 course of action taking with instances that are reported into Evers. Expulsions, we had none. In-school suspensions went from 2 to 32, and that sometimes has to do with the clarification of reporting. As reporting requirements change, what was not reported last year becomes reported this year, and now it looks like we need a tidal wave of in-school suspensions, when that actually is not the case. We probably had about the same number of total in-school suspensions. The difference being that more of them now fall into the categories measured by Evers, and than did last year. That's usually what happens. The problem, whether it's state testing or electronic violence and vandalism, as you keep changing the target, it becomes very difficult to use the data in a longitudinal way. Same chart, but by school again. Summary of action by school. And as you'll see, the number of incidents that are reported tend to go up based, again, the categorizations lend themselves to students who are older. It's that simple. So things that you see in a high school or middle school and probably don't see at the elementary level, those are the things that you're going to see in this report. We are required to report out on costs. These are most often vandalism costs, things that have to be repaired, replaced. There were 3 instances, 09-10, 4 instances last year. The cost of the district were minimal. But again, we are required to report anything that has to be replaced. There has to be a victim summary, and the categories, again, set by the state. We do not determine these, and we have to report them to the base of the definitions given to us by the state. General ed students, students with disabilities, students from another school, a non-student, school personnel, and an identifiable group of which there are a list that don't fall into the ones that are up there. As you can see, the most general victim was the general ed student, followed by students with disabilities. We did have 3 instances, 2 being involving school personnel, and 1 with a specific identifiable group. Offender categories follow similar, a little bit different, but similar categories. You'll notice that, again, we had 2 that were unknown. Those are usually vandalism. They happen after hours. As we've been revamping our security system, hopefully we'll have some measures in place to keep grounds more protected. But as you can see, most of them were general education students. The number was down. Students with disabilities, the number was up. And again, there are requirements and definitions by the state involving students, individual students, IEPs, and the rest, and what does and does not fall under electronic violence and vandalism. As far as the Awareness Week, there are specific things we have to do, and I do want to thank Mrs. Cecilia and Mr. Capello. They kind of head up the initiatives throughout the district and make sure that we're consistent in doing as much as we possibly can. And as you can see, that's showing respect again. That was the PSA developed by our school students and collaboration obviously with the faculty. And they're doing just a great job of thinking, you know what? We want to share these ideas, why don't we capture them in a way where we can share them across the district. So at the elementary level, we have a number of programs. At the middle school, we have clubs and the rest. We also have a series of presentations done by our staff, and he publicizes those. He also does a wonderful job of getting out into the community and working with after-school programs and things like that to give similar presentations so that we're casting as wide net as possible. At the high school level, again, we have our high school leaders here today. I want to thank them. And of course, Ms. Cecilia for putting this together. But we again work very closely with law enforcement. And I know tomorrow we have a big project where all students are stopping for an extended period of time to review video and have a guided discussion with trained faculty members. So again, it's always about education for us, and it's not a punitive thing. It's not a pointing fingers thing. It's about being able to get everyone north of there. There's the sticks and stones. That's the video that I was talking about. We have a number of groups that are in district all year long, whether our counselors are enabling specialists or student assistance counselors. But we use assemblies and programs constantly. We bring in speakers, as Mr. Barrett did at the high school. And we talked about our speaker before, but again, the reaction from the students is overwhelming. It's that you know that you've gotten to them when the bell has rung for dismissal, and they're still in the building. So they came up to shake his hand and have conversations. But again, character programs, the district's involved in every way possible. It really comes from our staff. Our faculty, our staff, our administrators constantly find new ways to work with the students to always promote positive character. I did want to talk about, I know it popped up there, Mr. Kelly's class at the high school. Put together a PSA as well. And that's being shown on Channel 1 and Channel 77. So that's out in the community again. That's our faculty allowing our students to showcase their talents in a meaningful, productive way and channeling them into real-life activities like this. This is an important issue. The kids get excited about it, and so they showcase their talents in that respect. Other than that, again, it's about education for us. The report is required, but the idea behind the report and the ERS is something that we take to heart and take very, very seriously. We want to make sure that we're keeping people safe. And the number one way to do that is education. So I want to thank our administrators, our faculty, our staff, certainly the board for this report. And for this report, we'll be back next October.
Mr. Superintendent, with regard to the cost of property damage, I'm wondering, possibly we can't recoup the money. However, is there a method that we could employ regarding the student working off the cost through community service? So we're talking hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars.
Oftentimes, and again, rather than work it off or like some kind of punitive measure, one of the things that we try and talk about are those positive consequences. where the action that they are forced to engage in, like community service, helps teach them, give them experience as to why what they did was not a good decision. So hopefully moving forward, it's not just that we recoup the money, which, again, we don't recoup it financially, but again, through the educational purpose, hopefully that we're recouping and educating someone who will not do that kind of act again. And will also help others make better decisions.
Thank you.
Jim, I know you briefly touched on it, Russ, but there's a meeting of the Hope Committee on October 27th at 7 o'clock, and I would encourage parents, grandparents, certainly children ages 12 and up to try to attend that presentation. I know you're aware of it, and I did send an email to Mr. Glitcho today, so hopefully that'll be passed on also.
Well, Mr. Glitcho and I talked actually yesterday. We're working with Mr. Vienmeister to get the whole information up on the website, so we can publicize it as well. He's also making available to his teachers so that they know. We've been working with the Director's office to make sure that we're publicizing as much as possible for them. The event's being held in the middle school.
Thanks.
No, thank you, Mr. Leslie. Next, we have committee reports. Dr. Reed, I'm sorry, the superintendent's report.
Sorry about that, you may know. That's okay. For the sake of time, based on the number of presentations, in fact, I've been talking far too much already. Keep this as short as possible. We talked about strategic planning. Over the coming month, we'll be building a district leadership team, preparing and issuing surveys via the internet, and establishing a schedule for community involvement. So please check the website for those things. We want as many people involved as possible. Involvement is the only way that we're going to be successful in the initiative. We've had a variety of career and college nights at the high school, and Ms. DeVilliers has been burning the midnight oil, and we're keeping our kids involved and thinking beyond just grade 12. So I want to thank her. The high school really is, as it should be, kind of a hub for activity during the school day and beyond, and that's what we like. I've met with a number of parents consistently. I had 3 more parent meetings again today, getting a feel for, in their opinion, what's working, what's not working, and this is the kind of conversation that we're fostering. Overall, the number one main concern which the board had kind of communicated to me before is communication. How we are and what we are communicating with the public. Do want to point out that we're constantly trying to improve our structure and our process to facilitate better communication. Case in point, one of the job descriptions on the agenda today for approval by the board, a critical cog in the administrative structure that we have not had in the district, and which causes some of the issue. So by bringing that in and setting things up, we will be more successful in that endeavor. I do want to point out that some of the conversations I've had, we met people coming from the board, coming in front of the board to talk about their personal issues. I've had conversations with specific citizens about a local war memorial and some of the other areas in town where vandalism, while not in Everest, have been occurring, and what we can do together to kind of stem that and educate. Also, school uniforms. I had Ms. Boston have a conversation with me about school uniforms, and we came to some interesting conclusions about what she really wants. And she's very passionate, and it was an exciting conversation, so I look forward to more of those. As well, I do want to point out that our Performing Arts Department, for those of you who don't know, applied for a grant through Glee organization. There's a website, www.gleegivenote.com, which we'll put on our website as well. They put together a video advertising themselves and why it's important that we keep supporting the arts, and so I wanted to make sure I put in a plug for them. I thought that was critical to get that out there and be able to find it on our website. The last piece I want to talk about, and I'll close, is just to give an update on the spring garden floor. We're still going back and forth with contractors. They did run the water test and flooded the roof. The roof turned out not to be the problem. One of the air handlers that was installed on the roof, the ceiling for the ceiling with an S, not with a C, for whatever reason had come apart, and the leaks were going through there. We were working with that contractor, Honeyfield, to figure out exactly what our next steps are. In the meantime, Mr. Nicolette over the weekend had turned up the heat, so to speak, to bake the room out and to start to keep drying out the floor. We have been returning to its appropriate size. In the meantime, we continue to work with Epic and with GPC to determine the remainder of the costs. We're finalizing that working with our attorneys, we're bringing in Classic to determine exactly what options we have to fix the floor as quickly as possible. It looks at this point like we will be able to salvage most of the floor, and we'll just have to be certain pieces that will have to be replaced. We'll have more as that comes. We're working on a daily basis. I know Mr. James working phones, and we're doing everything possible we can to get that situation rectified as quickly as possible.
Excuse me, when you say as quickly as possible, we were at a PTO meeting there, and there seemed to be some concern about the upcoming basketball season that quite a few of the spring garden pupils participate in. I think it's about a month away. Do we see, not to put anybody on the spot, but do we see ourselves having that floor repaired in time?
When my understanding last, we spoke specifically about the floor having Classic over the next week or so. So we'll listen more specifically. But what I can tell you right now is that it did look like we were going to have to make alternative arrangements and make sure they could play someplace else. But what we did talk about was that there are a number of facilities in the district. It's not a big town, and we'll make sure that we plan ahead of time to make sure everyone's aware so that that basketball tournament can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Ammons, any secretary's report?
No, I don't have any.
Committee reports. Dr. B.
Yes, we have a meeting report.
Let me begin by thanking Board President Kuchka for forming this committee back in May at our reorganization meeting. And I want to say that I was proud to be part of the effort of moving this process forward regarding the identification of best practices for our procurement needs in the district. I would also like to thank Superintendent Lazovic for his support and critical feedback throughout the process. He was a gem to work with, constantly available himself in terms of giving me feedback regarding these recommendations that you're going to see this evening. And I would be remiss if I did not thank my fellow committee members, trustees Flynn and Scalera, for their yeoman efforts. There was a lot of heavy lifting in this process, and I want to thank and commend them for that. Particularly trustee Flynn with her legal expertise. She helped shape and guide the documentation and the recommendations you're going to see before us this evening. And trustee Scalera with his background as a former assemblyman. It was invaluable feedback that we were able to receive from all our committee members in terms of shaping the final recommendations. So I'd just like to make a few comments before we get into the meat of our presentation. In the past, this district has been cited for failure to comply with public bidding and contract laws. Presently, this failure to comply with best practices has reared its ugly head. For example, the district is currently mired in ongoing construction litigation that appears to be increasing in exponential proportions with no end in sight. Additionally, we were fined on more than a few separate occasions by the state's Office of Fiscal Accountability and Compliance for not complying with the award of construction contracts. That being said, there's been a movement throughout the state that public entities must proceed with caution in the awarding of public service contracts. And this is what led to the establishment of the ad hoc committee to provide recommendations in the area of best practices. Okay, our charge. I think I speak for my fellow board members as well as myself when we are committed to ensuring that we do adhere to the highest ethical standards and principles possible in the procurement and management of our public contracts. Just to reiterate that point, again, Board President Kuchka did see and identify a need, and we were there to fill in that gap. So as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the heavy lifting that was involved, the committee members scoured countless documents in terms of best practices issued by the State Comptroller's Office, and essentially this document became our Bible in terms of what guided us through this process. And I'll avail this information to the public on our website. But also we looked at the Attorney General's Office in terms of their recommendations, as well as other model procurement provisions throughout the process, and throughout the country for that matter. And what are our recommendations? I think there's three principles that really guided and really helped dictate the conversation in terms of our committee. And how do we ensure that these recommendations will embrace efficiency, transparency, and accountability? And I see it as an opportunity to save the district from being exposed, both legally as well as financially. So this was an opportunity to hopefully correct some of the past sins of prior boards, so to speak. Preparation of requests for proposals. So I'm just going to speak briefly about some of the major findings in terms of our recommendations, and I'm going to pass the floor over to Trustee Flynn in a moment regarding the actual review of proposals. But again, in terms of preparing RFPs for the district, that primary responsibility lies with the superintendent, business administrator, as well as the finance committee. And it's an opportunity to review all draft RFPs and related documents, that being contracts, proposal evaluation forms. Also to prepare a schedule of procurements for the upcoming year. I think historically what we've seen at our reorganization meetings have been these RFPs that have essentially been thrown down our throats without any opportunity for us to actually review and to ascertain what these RFPs, or at least the quality of the RFPs. So now our recommendation is that before that process does take place, we want to be informed. We want advance notice of the issuance of any professional service contracts. And needless to say, we need to confirm that these funds are available for the proposed contracts. Regarding the preparation of RFPs, draft RFPs and proposed contract documents should be reviewed by board council. That has not traditionally happened in the past. That's a major recommendation that we're making. And also what has not been proposed in the past regarding contracts that exceed $2 million. That should be reviewed by the county superintendent as well as the New Jersey State Comptroller's Office. RFP content, statement of work. Again, this recommendation came straight from the Comptroller's report. It should be drafted in clear and unambiguous terms. And it should emphasize the result to be achieved and less focus on detailing the process of achieving that goal. So needless to say, if feasible, we want to ensure that there's a proposed budget. I think, again, historically, the district should try to avoid giving away a blank check to our professional service contractors. And again, this has been, it seems to have been common practice. We can't sustain it any longer. We also want to, we are requiring a list of mandatory disclosures, pay-to-play, corporate structure, and whatever stockholder disclosure statements may be available. Regarding the actual forms, the actual request for proposal forms are to be prepared prior to the advertisement, and we need to inform potential contractors of the actual evaluation criteria in which we will be making these decisions. In terms of mandatory disclosure requirements, we want to ensure that this is presented clearly to provide the district with sufficient information. Because again, we need to evaluate these proposals, and as Trustee Flynn will be talking about momentarily, that we are going to actually have an evaluation committee in place to review this process. And we also talk about having mandatory disclosure documents provided with all RFP documents. My last slide, in terms of casting a wide enough net regarding the RFP process. So we want to ensure that our pool of contractors solicited are as expansive and broad as possible. And again, we need to do this through a variety of media outlets and sources. And we list a few, for example, our website, Star Ledger, Nutley Sun. I think historically it was the Herald News in terms of what we focused on solely, so we want to move away from that. And Trustee Flynn, you want to go?
Okay.
I'll move your stuff.
Okay, thanks. All right. And like Trustee Dr. Reed said, a lot of this information came from the State Controller's report as a guide, and it's clear that this is the direction they're going in. And this board is not unlike many other boards or governmental entities out there that haven't been following the best practices. Indeed, there's some statements throughout the State Controller's report where they say this isn't required by law, but this is what best practices demand. And that report, the March 2011 report that was also issued within basically as an advisory document to be used by the legislator to shore up our state contracting laws. So that's going to be a continuing evolving process as we go forward. But anyway, getting to the point where the proposals are ready for review, it's clear that the business administrator will be the person who would conduct an initial review to make sure it's in conformance with the RFP guidelines. And the VA would be in a position to then present that information to the board to determine who's responsible and who's not. And if there's a non-responsive bid, that takes away any time or effort that the board or the administration needs to undertake for that proposal. The State Control report talks about developing and having a qualified evaluation committee in place to review certain proposals. So for instance, they give the example that if you're going to do an auditor proposal, you should probably utilize your Board of Ed members who have that expertise in finance to review that process. President, he'd have a better sense of what is responsive, what kind of contract we should be dealing with than some others. And that should be public information. It says it a lot. I don't think this would be a problem, but it was said enough times in the control report to note it in our proposed recommendations that should be public information given to contractors early in the process as to who's going to be on that evaluation committee. And I think going back to something that Dr. Reed said earlier, the development of a schedule of proposals or RFPs, that should be established as early as possible so that everyone knows in what direction you're going, rather than trying to put something together at the last minute. At least if you have a roadmap in place to move forward, it will make that process go more efficiently and smoothly. And the report also talks about screening for potential conflicts of interest at this stage. During these earlier stages, we should all make sure as board members whether or not there's any conflicts that we should maybe remove ourselves from the process. The evaluation proposal should be based upon a predetermined merit-based criteria. You'll see it there. It's 4 basic areas, and that should be your guide to create what will be on the next slide, a score sheet, or as to how you would evaluate each proposal. From that score sheet and those four characteristics, they were there. But it's okay. It's like cost. You look at the management structure. You look at costs. You look at past experience, and I'm missing one. You look at
Yes.
responsiveness to the proposal. That's the other one. It's okay. And you prepare a score sheet to guide the evaluation committee through that process. But that score sheet should be developed prior to the issuance of the RFPs. And then the evaluation committee would be charged with the responsibility of putting together a report to give to the full board as to what their findings are of the evaluation. Recommendations could be provided, could not. I mean, I think each board member could probably reach their own conclusion on a lot of these areas. But I think we were either way with that issue. We didn't know if it needed to be straight out recommendations or just an overview of what was presented to the board, so everyone's informed in a summary fashion as to what was presented. The award of the contract, and this is clear. I mean, this is where the case law comes out and problems arise in terms of the award. It needs to be based upon factual information that's gathered during the procurement process. It's almost like once you have all that information in, that is it. It can't be based on something that you heard somewhere else. You need to focus on the documents, focus on the information gathered by the evaluation committee, and focus on the information gathered maybe during the interviews of different vendors. That needs to be the basis of the contract award so that it can be sustainable in the event it's changed. This is an area, the duration of contract, this is the area in the law that's being shored up, is the length of a contract. It has been an issue here, but right now we're recommending that contracts not exceed 1 year, allowing for those circumstances of longer duration. And when we as a board do so, we should probably just explain the public purpose associated with maybe having a longer term contract. I think that should just be set forth somewhere, just to ensure it's consistent with state law. And then the award of the contract, the resolution. This is my wish list of how our resolutions would look like, so that you can almost read our resolutions like a story, so that you could exactly know what happened. Because in the end, if there is a challenge to the award, this is the document you want to hold up and say, this is why we awarded it, and that should sustain your decision. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You should describe the services, the date of the issuance of the RFP, explain how it was advertised, identify all proposals received. If you have material terms like price, cost, that should, any other material terms should be in there. State whether they were rejected. You should always put that in your resolution. Who the awards can be made to, or whether or not they're going to be rejected as a whole. State any general other reasons for the contracting decisions. Always state that there's sufficient funds in the budget. And all resolutions should include a not to exceed clause. This is something that was in the controls report. It's something that I've always, as a member of the audience, I always ask a few questions about. And that's why I think we put in this language about asking people who submit proposals to give us a budget as to what they anticipate their cost to be. Because I think that informs our decision-making, it informs our decision-making process and prevents from these contract costs for professional services to go out of whack. We sit here like today, we were all on the board a few years ago, but sometimes you're still stuck with certain decisions that were made that were maybe just an hourly rate. And I work in the hourly rate field, and I get it, but I also get that my clients ask me for a budget, and we're usually required to stick to it. So I would just recommend that, and we as a committee thought it would be good to have a not to exceed clause in all our resolutions and our contracts. And then later on, if they need to spend more money, they can come explain to us why they spend the money, and then we can decide whether or not that's a valid justification. So I think that should be it.
Real quickly, I just want to have Trustee Scalera share a few words if it is involved with the committee.
First, I'd like to thank the President for putting this committee together, and I truly, with the assistance of our chairman Mr. Reed and Ms. Flynn, it's been a great working project. It's very interesting to go through. Mr. Lazarevich came in the middle of us working on this, brought a lot to the table, and it was great discussions. Some of these things that we're reviewing here today probably would have affected some of the lawsuits we're in today, where prior to this board, and a lot of members were on it, the management company had been approved to manage our school projects. We're only approved to manage projects up to $3 million, and we had $20 million projects. Some of the problems that have caused where we are sitting today as a current board. I think it's succinct. Some of the statements that are up here are some of the legislation that I passed, actually sitting in the legislature. And it was done because if you follow Board of Educations across the state, it's probably the largest complaint coming into the AG's office on funds, misappropriations, the way things were done. So I truly enjoyed that. So I'd like to say at this time, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this as a policy for the Board of Education here. I know that some of this is in state statute, some is not, some is a recommended practice, and just like to make that motion for you today, Mr. President.
When we get into that portion of the meeting.
Sure, no problem.
Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Going along with what Trustee Scalera had to say, when I served on the board before, which was like years ago, we as a board did things the way this committee is suggesting now. So that's probably one of the reasons I'm on the board, along with maybe some other board members, because I wasn't happy with the way things were being handled in my mind. And I applaud the committee for the work they've done, and certainly 90% of it I think is perfect. I would be a little concerned about putting any board member on to make a final input on finances, fire expertise, whatever it might be. I think that's what I pay my experts for, the superintendent and the BA. So I would be a little concerned about that. Doesn't mean that it won't fly. I would just have a concern about that. I wouldn't want to see Mr. Cook, as an elected official, being put on a committee that might end up making decisions on some finance numbers. That's only for example. I wouldn't want Charlie Kaczynski to be put on to make a committee on a fire alarm system that's going to be put in based solely on my expertise as a past fireman. I don't think we as board members should find ourselves in that position. But that would be the only thing I would like to discuss a little bit further before we went into any type of a resolution with this. But I certainly think the groundwork is fantastic, long overdue. It should have been that way right along. It was that way when I was here in the past. Good job.
Mr. President, a couple of questions. I think Charlie hit one of them. I guess I wrote down a question when you mentioned it. I said, what if we don't have a board member with finance background?
If I may, they actually talk about that, and in some, I don't know if it was definitely the controls report, or so, I read so much information over time, they actually talk about appointing members of the community into your evaluation committee. It doesn't mean like, there should be an evaluation committee of 3 or 4 board members that are put in place, like almost like we had our ad hoc committee to look over, or like our negotiations committee. So it doesn't mean they all have to have some type of background. But if you have someone on your board that has that background, they recommend you use it, or in a case where it might be like a specialized area like finance, to me that's very specialized, but they even talk about going to outside in the community and community leaders and utilizing their support in helping you evaluate some of those areas. And it's just, the evaluation committee is just really there to do like a little bit of all the hard work and getting something into a document to present to the full board for their review. And it should be fair, it should be a good overview.
And that's something else that you said you were sure this committee would be making a recommendation or giving information only. And again, that's where I fall in, where I don't believe that, and what Charlie's bringing up makes sense, that information, yes, so that the board makes a decision, but recommendation, I think we would find ourselves in trouble saying, if somebody didn't agree with the recommendation, I think it puts us in a, I would say informational, and then we agree as a committee. I still think there's some things that we need to talk about before we're going to be passing a resolution or anything for this thing tonight. And the other thing that you mentioned that I wrote down a question, the not to exceed, and I understand where that comes from, but I look at it and I said, they come to you and they say that they need more money for something else in the project, to finish a project, and we say no. Does the project not get finished?
Yeah, probably, or you go back and say, go back to the drawing board and try again.
Yeah, I got you. I got some of those things are,
I mean, it could be a...
I mean, we all know that anyone that's had home construction or something, I bet, that there's always the unforeseen, and there's no way anyone's going to tell you what's behind a concrete wall. We've had that already. I know we've all were excited about it, but in reality, they were doing what they were supposed to do. They couldn't do anything more than that. I just have some questions on that not to exceed, where it would put us in a position. That's all.
I had the same question.
One of the things, as a board member, that I'm sure, I think we all share the same frustration, and especially in the chamber area, it's like the level of information we get. So that's what I'm trying to get, is to get that information to us from our professionals and say, you know what, if you're going to ask us for more money, you're going to have to come and explain that. If they explain it, if there's a real reason, of course, I think we should vote for it. That's all.
I think half of it is information.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
better
Actually, more than
communication.
half of it is information.
I'd just like to cover a couple things. One is on the exceed. If we pass a bond for $2 million and we state in there not to exceed $2 million, we're going to have a real tough time. So by putting that in there, the contractor knows the limits that he's going to have to work with. If he hits a problem, he's going to have to come early on, because that also limits the contractor from saying, well, they know we passed a $2 million bond referendum, so coming in $1,999,000 because he was able to go to the max.
I got you on that, but we're talking about a bond for $2 million with a contractor. Now you're talking about broken down to electricians, plumbers, everyone else down the field. We're getting it from the electrician, we're getting it from, I agree with you. Of course you can't exceed $2 million, but that's what you went out for.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
Well, it could be. I just want to talk about it.
And
And the other
some
thing
of the
is,
ones that have come in front of us haven't been exceeding the referendum money that we've had. I just think they may have been exceeding their particular.
but if they see in their contract, I wholly believe if they see it do not exceed, they're going to be much sharper on their pencil watching how they're spending the money.
And again, I agree with you. I don't have a problem with the not exceed. I just have a problem with how
to solve the problem.
Well, we can approve it after, once they come legally, the mechanism is there
Right.
for us to say, okay, we see that there's, like, behind the wall, and I agree with it 100%, that's an authorized thing. But if you come to me all of a sudden, and say, well, we used, brass instead of plastic, and that's where the overcost was, that's a different reason. So,
And again, they're going to make a presentation to the board, or they're going to make a presentation to the BA?
well, to the BA, but it's going to come here for a vote, so we might as well hear it. the committee, at least,
You might
let's say,
make a lot of
for an example,
presentations.
no, you won't have to. For an example, it can be done at the administrative committee, Mr. Kaczynski, that's where it falls, chairs. They can come there and do it like we're doing things now, Mr. Lazarevich is set up. They can heard there, and then the chairman from that committee will give a report here, so the whole board would know what's going on.
Right, I just think what I'm trying to say is I'm asking these questions because I don't think it's clear.
That's all I'm trying to say too, Fred, and Vicki, and, well, it's not,
No,
the plan, the formula is what we should have been doing all along, okay? I just think before we jump into making a resolution, there's a couple things we should just make sure we're all clear on, and then we move forward, that's all. Basically, it's all good.
And I think the discussion on the finances, you gotta manage the overall budget, whether it's a referendum, it's similarly, these change orders are within the $36 million that you have to manage within there, you can't exceed. That's right. You can't go outside, and if it's operational, you can't exceed the budget, the operational budget, you gotta find the money somewhere, or you just can't do it.
Yes. I'd like to thank the committee and particularly Dr. Reed for presenting these guidelines to us. I think they were sorely needed and you did a fantastic job. I have a much better understanding now of the procedures that we need to follow, and I hope that they are in fact being utilized by our professionals. That said, though, I also have a concern with the evaluation committee being comprised of only board members, and Ms. Flynn did allude to adding members of the community. I really would like to see that being with our professionals that we pay, and also too, I'm not sure that I agree with having that committee make recommendations, perhaps presenting the information to us or having our professionals present that information to us is a wonderful idea, but I don't know that they should make those recommendations. I think the board as a whole votes on our recommendations from our BA and our superintendent, and I think I'd like to see it stay that way.
Can I respond quickly? No, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that's some areas that we may want to modify. But the whole idea, and this addresses Tommy's question earlier, that these evaluation criteria, just the mere fact that we want to have an evaluation committee removes the subjectivity in the process. So enough with the patronage and all that other good stuff, the quid pro quo. Now we have an opportunity to put a process and a system in place which will give the central administration standard operating procedures to abide by. So at the end of the day, I think that's something that we can definitely come to an agreement on in terms of how we want to shape that final.
Yeah, it was an area we discussed a lot and we didn't come to a conclusion per se. Maybe the evaluation process was dictated sometimes, I don't know. But we wanted to also keep it broadly enough in case it wasn't policy.
Keep it as objective as possible as well.
And to allow it to be flexible.
Yeah, again, I think it's a great phenomenon. I believe it's just a couple of things, and I think as what we're doing now is what we'll be doing when we get one. I mean, this is the whole purpose of it, to get it up here so that we can all work it out as a group.
Absolutely.
Dr. Reed, I want to piggyback on my colleague's statements. Certainly extraordinary amount of work. In fact, this looks like it could be a model for the rest of the state if it succeeds. It talks to the issue of accountability, the issue of responsibility and transparency, something that, as the superintendent alluded to earlier regarding communication, the needs that we have in this district. So job well done. But my question is this. Has this procurement process been implemented in any other district? If so, how has it worked? Has it served the district well? Because a lot of the questions that we have, or that some of our committee members have, may have been answered as a result of someone else implementing this process.
Well, the Nutley School District will be leading a charge in this effort, and Trustee Flynn did contact the New Jersey School Board's administration, and she could discuss the conversation she had with their policy folks.
Okay, can we hear that?
They liked what we sent them. It was something they hadn't seen before, and they asked if they could hold on to it and use it to share with other districts.
So this is...
Yeah. I said...
We're going to get our $25,000. I'll have to change my vote on that.
I really...
Well, that's good. That's good. They reached out.
Yeah, I sent it to them only because I didn't, like you're saying, I don't know where it's been. I mean, we looked at a lot of different areas, and it's always recommended, but no one then follows through with that. And I think we're going to be, I think that's what's great about this board is that we're moving in that direction, doing something that other districts should be doing.
Thank you, Greg. Thank
I
you.
think that, and I'd like to thank the committee, they did a great job, and it's a great job, and the product is a good product. I think that as far as the resolution goes, if we make a policy, it has to go with the administrative committee, is the one who writes things up as policy. You need 2 readings, and there's a procedure that goes through this, so I don't think that we would be passing a resolution tonight. It would come from the administrative, which...
Do we have to pass a resolution to send it to administration or something?
No, they're just, it's theirs. It's there. They have it.
Process, I don't know.
Who's in charge of administration?
And Mr. Scalera is on it, so I'm sure he will guide administrative.
That would get you, Mr. Krasinski.
Okay. Academic committee report.
I'm sorry, I'm ready to get folks, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry that our students left us, but I just want to commend the students who were honored this evening for their pursuit of academic excellence. They are all destined to make meaningful contributions to their chosen professions, and I wish them continued success as they move forward with their chosen career paths. The academic committee met, what date did we meet? I have that, it's a blank spot, but we'll get back to that.
You met.
First and foremost, we discussed the superintendent goals, which we had a very lively presentation tonight from Superintendent Lazovic. In essence, we were extremely supportive throughout this entire process regarding the student performance goals, and again, this whole idea of achieving or attaining academic excellence. The 2 qualitative goals, I just want to make a quick statement regarding our former director of the search for our superintendent. I know there's a phase 1 and a phase 2 of that process. Phase 1 being the hiring of Superintendent Lazovic, phase 2 being the strategic planning effort. And I know we've had these discussions time and time again, but to my knowledge, Dr. LeBrera will be pulled into the fold to help facilitate the strategic planning effort for the entire district. And we're very fortunate to have him on board regarding that matter. What's so interesting in terms of Superintendent Lazovic talking about the issues pertaining to violence, bullying, alcohol, and other drug use. Back in February, we had the support of the administration as well as the Municipal Alliance in moving forward with a Nutley Youth Survey. And that was administered to approximately 532 students in both the middle and high schools. Partnership, again, with the Municipal Alliance. And at that time, the board gave unanimous approval to move forward with the administering of the survey. In essence, it was a comprehensive needs assessment regarding our students' health, social, and psychological well-being. It was modeled after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Survey. So that being said, we now have state and national comparison data to actually assess how Nutley performed in reference to the rest of the state as well as nationally. The survey was used to help identify factors that place youth at risk for a variety of problem behaviors, against substance abuse, alcohol abuse, violence, bullying, and so forth. The survey also has questions pertaining to various mental health issues, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, as well as suicidal ideation. So again, these are important concerns that we all have for our students. This past year, unfortunately, I attended a wake for one student who did pass away from an overdose, so that was, again, one way too many. So we definitely have to make definitive strides to address and hit these issues head on. Additionally, the survey examined various protective factors. How can we identify buffers that will protect our children from engaging in these at-risk behaviors? Again, we asked questions about family and community support, participation in extracurricular activities. So we had a list for both the middle school as well as the high school for that matter, singular, I'm sorry. This can serve as an invaluable planning and programming tool for our student assistance coordinators in terms of what Superintendent Lazovic just alluded to earlier. So in essence, how do we deploy already scarce resources to best meet the needs of our children? This baseline data could also serve the district well if we do apply for potential grants, which you also mentioned, as well as the Municipal Alliance. There's tons of money out there in terms of drug abuse prevention related needs on both the state and federal levels. So that would be something that I would be very interested in assisting the Board of Education in moving forward in that direction. And at some point, once our committee does review the national as well as state findings and we dig deep into the actual survey results for Nutley, We're going to present, or at least have Joe Capello work with Municipal Alliance to present these data before the full board. Another point that was addressed in our academic meeting was the idea of transition days. This was an issue that was brought to the board's attention at our 9/27 board meeting. We currently, for our middle school, we have an information session that is provided in the spring for 6th grade students and their families. The week before school begins, the incoming 7th graders also participate in an information session. So the idea being is, how do we improve the communication about transition meetings with parents? Again, I know, I should call him Assemblyman Scalera, Trustee Scalera, I'm sorry about that. But yes, you had that issue with your son in terms of that transition from 6th grade to 7th grade. So I think it's not a novel premise or notion. We can embrace technology. We could have our staff perhaps prepare a video that goes on our website or our local cable news station regarding, this was Lisa Danchek Martin's idea, in terms of how do we communicate the needs to our parents, or at least try to help close that gap regarding the transition process. We also create an overview of the major topics taught in each content area and have it presented by our curriculum coordinators, identify summer reading lists, or identify any additional prep time that could take place during the summer months for our transitioning students. And then also what did emanate from our discussion was, how do we address the needs of our special needs student population, as well as trying to increase communication with the parents of students with special needs. So we definitely need to think about providing additional meeting time for students to get acclimated to their new surroundings and environment. And we also, again, speaking towards another prior citizens' concerns about establishing a special education parents advisory committee, and I know that Superintendent Lazovic has been in discussions with Director Monaco about when do we finally get that up and running for the district. Regarding clubs and field trips, I'm sorry, it's getting a little lengthy, we're almost done. The administration met with elementary school principals to discuss a fair and equitable distribution of clubs for all elementary schools, which you will find on this evening's agenda. Additionally, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Ms. Gina Villani, is working on a process that will streamline the request for both clubs and field trips for the 2012-2013 academic school year. We also need to open the lines of communication with our business administrator and the finance committee to ascertain the amount of funds that we have that have been budgeted for this current school year as well as prospective school years. And it's a very important endeavor as we do prepare for next year's budget. The idea, once we're moving right along, professional development. Committee members discussed the use of single session days for professional development. We suggested the possibility of combining some of the single session days and then providing full professional development days instead. We also discussed the reimbursement of graduate courses for staff members, which goes to the superintendent for his review and approval. And the committee was in full support of the administration's recommendation of approving courses that are meaningful and directly related to a teacher's work. Student assignments. This was another issue that was brought to our attention at one of our prior board meetings. We discussed the way in which the district disseminates information about teacher assignments at the elementary school level. Currently, it's a bit frustrating for parents to wait the day before school to look at a list posted on homeroom doors. Granted, it may be a bit nostalgic, which I can recall 30 years ago, having to go through that rigmarole, but maybe not too practical in today's environment. So we need to explore alternative ways of notifying parents that's a bit more efficient. Again, making use of email and our website and so forth. And last but not least, on the technology front, we discussed, or at least we requested as a committee, an update regarding electronic grading and online report cards. And I was happy to see in this week's board briefing report from Superintendent Lazovic that we are moving full steam ahead with the Director of Educational Technology. And it's a position that I feel so desperately needed for the district, so we fully support his desire of moving in that direction and finding this individual to hopefully spearhead our efforts in this regard. We also requested as a committee that a true parent portal be made available for the 2012, or the start of the 2012 academic year. And again, this would give parents an opportunity to review homework, look at progress reports, and so forth. And let me see what else here. Yes, for our next committee meeting, we're also requesting a presentation on where the district is headed in terms of a student information system, including cost and system requirements. Again, all this information should emanate from our strategic planning efforts. I understand that. but it's a great idea, I think, to have the committee on board with some deliverables in terms of a time frame and when we could expect to see some of these milestones for the district, for that matter. So needless to say, we would like to invite Mr. Riemeister to attend our next meeting, to be part of this conversation, just to give us an update. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have that job description prepared for our Director of Educational Technology. And last but not least, I just asked for a couple updates regarding our AP policy at the high school, as well as what's happening with our 09 period proposal. And Ms. Villani is looking into that matter for our next committee meeting. Thank you so much.
Mr. Kaczynski.
Is there any demonstration?
Questions?
Mr. Reed, I want to thank you for talking about transition days on the committee. I've talked for some time on some different proposals for everything from sports to education, especially between the junior high school and the high school. We should be, and it's almost marketing also, I hate to say that at the same time, so our students know how to get it from here to football, to soccer, to basketball, as well as education. And I say the same thing with our music program. Our music program is second to none. They should know what they're going from junior high school over. So I support that. I look forward, if possible, to have a conversation with your committee on some of those things.
Whatever feedback we have. Absolutely.
Dr. Reed, I want to pass off an idea to you. Sure. Ms. Martin, you're involved with the Academic Booster Club, correct?
Yes.
I have an idea. The idea just popped into my head watching these children, or these fine young men and women getting these academic awards. I think sometimes when you give awards out, sometimes some shareholders are not here. And I'm talking about the educators, the teachers. And I'm talking about the teachers who are presently teaching them. I'm talking about first grade, and second grade, and third grade. I'm talking about the long string of fine teachers that brought these children to the point where they're now achieving some great goals. So my suggestion is this, my idea is this, and if it's possible, because it may be a little work involved, in the Academic Booster Club's doing an extraordinary amount of good work in the district, if we could somehow contact those teachers of these students, most of them are in district, and to let them be part of their success. I think a lot of times a teacher, obviously, I mean, in the past few years, haven't gotten the recognition that I think they should get. And I think it'd be a great thing for a first or second grade teacher to be here, enjoying part of their success, watching a child that came through their ranks, if you will, succeed in this manner. So it's an idea that I would ask you to think about. And if it can be done, I'd love to see that done. Thank you.
Mr. Kaczynski.
Are you sure, Mr.
I'm ready.
Can I have a time on the Dr. Reed show tonight?
Mr. Lazarus, check the hat trick.
I say that lovingly. It's long overdue, the academic prowess that we have on the board, and I'm very proud of you and the committee that's working so hard. And I say that lovingly. Our administration committee, which consists of myself, Steve Rogers, and Fred Scalera, have also been working very hard to try to resolve some issues that are coming before our committee. We did spend quite a bit of time talking about the PPA solar panels that we're going to be looking into. We might get the first chance to try our RFP guidelines that we want to go, in what direction we want to look at. We are probably going to be making some type of a presentation before our next committee, which is November 7th. We hope to have Commissioner Tucci there. Well, I'm sorry, the date has probably changed a little bit, but our next committee, we are going to have some people make a presentation on the solar panels that we might want to look into that are actually no cost to the citizens, no cost to anyone. And we also have the commissioners on board. Certainly Commissioner Tucci wants to be a part of that discussion. So we did spend some time talking about that. We did spend quite a bit of time talking about the uniform issue. And we are doing extensive research into the pros and cons of the uniforms. And we will make a presentation to the board and perhaps a presentation to the citizens as a whole. That's still up for discussion, but we are taking quite a bit of time looking at it. We talked about shared services, which I think we have set a tentative meeting with the Board of Commissioners open November the 1st, correct? I'm sure the President will make us all aware of that, but November 1st, we're looking at a shared meeting with the Commissioners and the Board of Education. Part of our requirement and their requirement with the new state laws that have come down, but certainly part of what we need to do and should have done a long time ago. So we'll be moving forward with that. We talked about the superintendent's goals, which you saw tonight. We talked about the job descriptions, with Dr. Reed alluded to, some personnel changes. We also spent some time talking about the budget and where we're going to be in the upcoming 2012-2013. And then we spent quite a bit of time, as my board members are aware, of starting to review the policies. As you know, the administration committee is going to be reviewing every policy that the board has, simply to highlight some areas that maybe need to be updated, making sure that everyone is aware of all the policies and whatever changes might have taken place, a thorough update, so we have got a busy many months ahead of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? We now come to the portion of our meeting where we allow members of the public to address the board. In this session, we allow questions or comments on only the resolutions addressed on tonight's agenda. Our board regulations allow 20 minutes for these communications. Each person shall be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask you to try to stay within this requirement. Speakers may speak more than once, only after all others wishing to speak on the topic have been heard. All statements will be directed to me as chairperson and only addressed to board members individually. Please be mindful that if your statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, irrelevant, or redundant, your participation may be terminated. Please remember to always state your name and address each and every time you address the board. The first person wishing to speak, please step forward.
Good evening, Mr. President. Alan Thomas, 108 McKinley Street. Mr. President, I just want to take a moment to very much endorse Administrative Resolutions 1 and 2. And I applaud the new superintendent for bringing these resolutions forward.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance Resolution number 7. Another change order. Mr. President, can we get a public explanation of why a change order of this magnitude is required, particularly why this work was not included in the original contract or original specifications?
This is the resolution, this is the change order that we've been talking about at several of the meetings. I think we've had that discussion with the public. Our architect was here and discussed this one back in July. And we've had discussions in previous meetings.
Well, I wasn't here in July, Mr. President, so if I could hear it, I'd appreciate it.
Well, this, it's not up to me to answer, but I'll start the conversation.
Very briefly, since we've discussed this.
I know, but in all due respect.
We can discuss this, tell you about it later, rather than wasting the time of the public.
I was just going to say that, Mr. Thomas. Certainly, we as board members also had these concerns. We had the contractors in, we had the architects in. There was extensive work that they were not aware of, believe it or not, at the particular time. They discussed what the concerns were, what the changes were. We as a board were pleased with their explanation of what was going on. I think the board is comfortable with the changes that are taking place. Certainly, we could sit down with you later on and give you a lengthy update on what they were. But there were many board members that had the same concerns that you do. And when we did meet with them and we went through step by step what the changes were. We were pleased with their explanation. We understood their explanation, we weren't pleased with it.
So I think if you want further detail, we'll provide it to you after the meeting.
So I'm not going to be allowed to ask any more questions about it, Mr. President.
About that particular item.
Sorry?
About that particular item.
Wasn't aware that putting a new HVAC on top of the roof was something that was behind the concrete wall.
Well, that was, I said, part of the discussion was some work that was behind concrete walls. Part of it was the new HVAC on top. There was some lengthy discussion about.
It's an involved discussion that we've gone through in public, and that's why we will be happy to inform you about it in private. Anyone else?
Mr. President, if I recall your instructions at the beginning of this section, we should not be asking questions now about any of the presentation.
Resolution items only.
Correct. So not even a proposed resolution such as the procurement committee's report?
That's not a resolution.
Thank you, Mr.
Anyone else? If not, I'll close this portion of the meeting. Dr. Reed, will you move the academic resolutions, please?
Yes, Mr. President. I'd like to move academic resolutions 1 through 3 with a modification on page 5. Okay, under Nicole David, we're going to remove that, or I'm sorry, we're going to remove her name from the list on page 5.
Which one, John Walker or Ron Walker?
Under Nutley High School?
High school.
Yes, student council representative. And the second modification, the list regarding Jennifer Sabatelli. She's going to be replaced by Dina Handon, D-E-N-A-H-A-N-D-O-N. Okay, that being said, I would like to move academic resolutions 1 through 3 as stated.
I'll second it, Mr. President. I would just ask one thing, if I could. In some time, we have a breakdown, a little presentation of what all of these committees do throughout the year. Just my own clarification.
We could have some kind of information.
We actually have that breakdown already in the school for the next
Well, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Any discussion?
Mr. President, I would be remiss without mentioning that upon review of this, I was a little taken aback by the fact that Washington School doesn't have a student council. And I know this is something Mr. Lastig's already addressed to me, and my next, he indicated that there is no one, I guess, that would volunteer for that. And I feel it's, and he also indicated, right, I don't know if I'm correct on this recollection, that they haven't had a student council for some time now. And that concerns me in a lot of ways, which I don't, they're going to go into, but I don't know, Mr. Lastig, is there a way that someone else throughout the district can volunteer for that position? Or has that been explored, or is it something?
Again, it's not volunteer, they're.
I say, yeah, they say, they raise their hands, I'll do it, and then they get paid for it.
One of the things, yes, the overarching answer is yes, but not technically, because most of the clubs run during lunch. So you need someone who's location specific. That being said, we have been talking to administrators and a lot of faculty members, some of the club advisors, about what clubs represent, and I can share this in my email to you, at the elementary level, how we may have to look at clubs getting for next year, having a comprehensive plan. And obviously, student council is something we want to get involved in. Guaranteeing that happen, I can't do it. Also making the conversation different so that the option is there again. It has not been, and by going through this process, we found that as well.
Okay. I just hope something's going to follow up on, I hope to find a means by which Washington School has a student council. That's, I don't know, I think that's just so impressive.
Any other discussion? Not call the roll, please.
Mrs. Stanchek Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Dr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Scalera?
Yes.
Mr. Pizzano?
Yes.
Mr. Cookton?
Yes. Kaczynski, will you move administrative resolutions 1 and 2?
Yes, Mr. President, I move administration resolutions 1 and 2 as so printed.
Second that.
Discussion. Not call roll, please.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Flynn?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Dr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Scalera?
Yes.
Mr. Sposato?
Yes.
Mr. Gupta?
Yes. Mr. Sposato, would you move finance resolutions 1 through 7?
Yes, Mr. President, I move finance resolutions 1 through 7 as written.
Second.
Second.
Discussion.
Go ahead, Charles.
Mrs. Russo.
Yes, on question number 10, the grammar school lunch program, can I get a brief explanation?
Go 1 through 7.
1 through 7.
1 through 7. First one.
See, that's what you keep the voting through.
Mr. Scalera.
Thank you, Mr. Kusha. On number 7, you know, I know I think it was back in July, but when we see these change orders, I'd like to see backup, because I don't remember the number, I voted on July. Online, we're a whole bunch of new, on our website, we're a whole bunch of proposals and things. There's another even change order, number 9, which we haven't seen yet, I guess, but it's posted on the EVD site. It talks about 3 more condensers to be hooked up for 104 and 106. That is the same hallway, that is the music hallway. You know, I see another $9,000 one coming up. I would like to see backup before I vote, so I just want to let you know I'll be abstaining on number 7. But we need to see backup comparing from now on to what we get, what we get, if we're going to approve the funding again. Because I can't confirm from July till now. And then looking online today, just to try and find this, I found another proposed change order for 104.6, which is the same hallway, dealing with air conditioning, that room 100 is in, which is the music room. So this concerns me, all these changes.
Ms. Lynn.
I have similar concerns. I actually didn't realize that until you just said that. So I actually now need better clarification as to that $102,000. I mean, I know we had a discussion, I know we all expressed our concerns with the lack of backup then. We've gotten some, but not much, and now with these new ones coming up, I would rather, I don't know if it's possible, to approve them all together as a group, so we really know what we're doing. I'm still perplexed as to the practices of our construction manager in terms of, you know, you get one thing, and then somewhere down the road you get three others, and the lack of foresight is startling to me.
And Mr. Kutcha, actually, I just noted this here, added to that one today, it says, provide the material they will install, those units in 104 and 106. So that is a different change order that I found online, 104 and 106, that must have been added to that. Because the line there says, provide label to install rooftop units 104 and 106, 3 through the wall. And then there's another change order here, number 9, for those specific things for another $9,328. That was online today.
I don't know.
So it's just kind of hard to figure out where we are in these change orders.
I don't know if it makes sense, Mr. President, this goes to the administration committee as a whole and be presented. Now I'm confused, actually. I wasn't.
I believe that this is the same that.
My problem is I'm the oldest person on the board, okay? And I remember specifically this board spending hours talking about this. There should be no question in anybody's mind, excluding 104 and 106, excluding them, there should be no question on how we spent $102,066. There should be no question in mind because we spent many hours discussing this as a board.
I really think somewhere this 9,000 on proposal order number 9 has to be added into this 102 because it's now saying, please provide material able to install all these units in 104 and 106. Yet today I'm posted online, there's another $9,000 change order for 104 and 106.
What's the chances of us finding this out before the meeting?
I think
Like
that
calling up and asking.
I did not to say anything, but I did send an email out the other day. I did send an email out.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Okay,
My
I did.
question was, before the meeting, I would.
Mr. Kaczynski was copied on the email.
In all due respect, he did ask for clarification and did not get it.
Okay, change order 9, well, those games is electrical.
The change order 9 that you were referring to, Mr. Scalera, that is from Vespa Electric? Okay, so that's for the electrical work.
But you're noting it under the $102,000 change order that per se we did for the HVACs, because now you're adding it in below, so somewhere that 9,000 had to be added and not.
This is for the actual univents, the actual pieces of equipment for the air conditioning. That proposed change order that you're referring to today is for the electrical component.
That wasn't included in $102,000?
No, it's
It's
two
only-
separate
contracts.
It's two separate contracts.
But my point is, if we saw that spelled out, I wouldn't be questioning that here today, but as board members, we should be able to see that.
So my question is then, how do we make this work easier for the board members? Do we have a solution?
We've been working with a number of the board members now, and we even got emails today talking about the improvement. Are we there yet? No. But there has been improvement. Again, this is the second, to the point where I think we got ourselves in trouble, because if we hadn't been giving so much information, there would be no PCOs and board briefing, and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But we're trying to keep you as informed
That's
as
true. I read everything you said
from the
about it.
beginning. Now I recognize my error. No. Again, the PCO had to follow the mechanical piece, because the electrical piece can't. There are two separate vendors, it would be two change orders. One follows the next. The first thing we had to do is handle, and again, this presentation, going back to my question, which you remember, because it's right on. We had the architect here as well as the construction manager, and we went through every piece of the 102. That step being taken, maybe next time we hold off the PCO, so we can have that conversation when we're prepared to have it. But that I do understand the confusion in that as well.
But Ms. Lassiter, and actually, Ms. Flynn just picked it up, the proposed change order number 9, which we never approved, that we now spent, was actually put up in July 28th. So we should have seen this long before now, and we're approving payment on it.
We're not.
Well, this is in there according to this.
No.
No,
Oh.
this is the, that's what.
So my point is, then we should have known about the electric, if it was the same proposal to the project. Because the 728 was the proposal on the electric. I mean, I just want to know where the
How
money
did
is,
you
that's
miss
all.
that, Freddie?
In July, they did mention.
It wasn't out on the website, I got it today.
They did mention in July that it would be coming, and it is here now, and we have it as a separate piece. So this is, there's no surprise here.
Well, it's not surprise, I think it's lack
Clarity.
clarity.
That's all.
And we need to just ask our professionals to try to convey to all of us who are so busy. Everyone here is working so hard, but our professionals should be working even harder, I say. And should describe the stuff in better clarity, because it's
100%. There should be no reason that a board member should come before a meeting in the public and not have the answers that he or she asked for before the meeting. It's unacceptable, and I know the superintendent and the VA are working to get us closer to our goal, and we've all made the point that we're not going to accept mediocrity anymore, and it is getting better.
Any other discussion
With
of
that being said,
Mrs. Russo?
Not on this, I did actually have a question in this section.
you did.
Well, we still, okay?
Just looking for.
We still have a discussion on 1 through 7. so.
Yes, on number 1, requests for use of school buildings and grounds. I see many dates on there that have already passed. I understand we're trying to change the process and move away from that. Number 1.
Okay.
I've repeated the question, how we can approve something that's already happened. And I understand we're entering new processes to avoid that. But again, here we find ourselves approving things that have already happened.
The superintendent did provide one explanation in his comment, his briefing, which basically said that the notice of that meeting was after the West Line event, and in order to attend, we had to do this.
When we get requests that come into the building use in between meetings, sometimes we have to move in, and most of these are actually, the ones that we're looking at, they're all long-term. For the most part, 10-9, not so much, but the rest of them are, they for this meeting, but they're going to go throughout the year, so it's still something we can call back. But that's a decision that we have to make as administrators in between meetings, communicate to the board as soon as we possibly can. That's why we're trying to get this stuff out in the briefing.
I just have a question on resolution number 2, has to do with the approval of service providers for the, I guess, our next year's, is it the next year's school year? School year?
11, 12.
So I just want a better understanding of what we're using them for. Is it on an as-needed basis, or are we using them already? Is there a separate contract for each of these providers?
The Bergen County Special Services contract is deaf services. that are used for specific students in the district on an as-needed basis, as well as the pediatric rehabilitation and the Q basis. And every year, the district works with the Nutley Family Services Bureau to provide counseling, and that contract is capped at $7,000.
On the other three contracts, the amounts that we anticipate to expend, that was included in last year's budget.
Yes.
In this year's budget.
But this year, I'm trying to I understand.
I have a question on what Vicki just brought up. Are we also looking into the OT, PT, how much we're spending, so that we'll have some type of an idea for next year, if it's worth hiring like we used to? Is this something that we're at?
Yes, it's part of the operational review.
Okay.
Any other discussion? If not, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Stanchek Martin? Yes. Ms. Flynn? Yes. Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Dr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Scalera?
Yes, except just on principle, I'm standing on 7.
Mr. Spizzato?
Yes.
Mr. Clifton?
Yes. Mr. Kaczynski, would you move personnel resolutions 1 through 12?
Certainly, Mr. President. I move resolutions, personal resolutions 1 through 12, as so printed.
Second.
Discussion. Mrs. Russo.
On question number 10, the lunch program for the grammar school, could I get a brief explanation?
10 additional hours.
What page are you on?
Now, page 12,
Yeah, number 10.
number 10,
Cool, additional
extra
hours.
compensation,
Compensation.
So,
near the end. Payment for lunch program at elementary schools.
now you're on the wrong one.
You're on the wrong something.
You have the right meeting date?
10,
That's actually 14 now.
10,
Number
10 on
11, I
personnel.
know we had some changes and we got an updated agenda today.
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't get that.
So it's question number 11, extra compensation,
Bottom of page 14.
and starting at the bottom of page 14, payment for lunch program at the elementary schools.
What you're seeing in this agenda, again, is our effort to make sure we're budgeting ahead of time and actually get to approve before we give services. There are certain programs throughout the district that we run categorical that we should be paying for the entire year. We have not been posting or paying as such. That's been changed. So what you're actually seeing is something we've been paying for always, which is that we have teachers who provide supervision during lunch duty, and there's a contracted amount that those teachers are paid for doing so. And working with the principals is not only the most cost-effective way to provide these students, but arguably the most effective way because students respond extremely well to the teachers and the teachers know the students. What's interesting to us is that because you're, and this was a conversation I thought we actually had a briefing, when you see the numbers by themselves, they look relatively large. We talk about lunch coverage, and the way that works is we sat down with the principals, Ms. Malani and Mrs. James, actually answered all of them, to work through the process of just simply calculating out how many teachers do you need, how many hours does that equate to, what is the rate, and there's your total. On top of that, though, some schools are a lot higher than others because we have students with IEPs that can go on late even during lunch. So that's what that breakdown is. But this actually shows you the total that we're now making sure we stay within. And there are more people being approved here that would actually provide lunch coverage in any one day because I want to see everyone who will be getting this. And it helps us in payroll because we go back to the resolution, we use our time card appropriately, and we stay within budget.
Thank you, I've never seen that before. Thank you.
So now, that's on the free period time.
That's on their lunch.
On their lunch. I'm just saying, it makes it more people understand that they're giving up something.
Absolutely. They're
Right.
giving up their time, their contracted time.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin? Yes. Ms. Flynn? Yes. Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Dr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Russo?
Yes.
Mr. Scalera?
Yes.
Mr. Сказано?
Yes.
Mr. Clifton?
Yes. Hearing of citizens. In this section, we allow questions or comments on all school-related matters. The regulations allow 30 minutes for these communications. Again, each person shall be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask you to stay within this requirement. As stated earlier, all statements be directed to me as chairperson, and no one may address the board members individually. Please be reminded that if your statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, irrelevant, or redundant, your participation may be terminated. Please remember to always state your name and address each and every time you address the board. First person wishing to be heard, please step forward.
Higgins, 132 Lakeside Drive, Nutley. I have some questions about the rental of the junior high on Sundays, but I wanted to ask one quick question about a personnel issue. There is a Kirsten Sylvester who's been hired as behaviorist, and when she signs evaluations, she writes MANJSP. The only acronym finder that I can find for NJSP is New Jersey State Police, but I don't think that's correct, so I was wondering if someone could tell me what it stands for.
I don't know the actual number. What's the question?
Well, I would like to know what NJSP stands for, what kind of certification or, training does that indicate, because it's not one that I am aware of. Thank you. I wanted to ask some questions just so I can better understand how the decision was made and the process that it went through for renting to Liquid Church, the high school. I wanted to know how the church came to approach the Nutley Board of Ed. Did they just file an application randomly, or did somebody in the community attend their services elsewhere and point them in the direction? I was just curious about that. I don't know if anyone knows that answer.
I don't know who approached this.
They applied an application through the business administrator for the use of our church, as had been done in the past by other. The church applied through the business administrator to use our school, as had been done in the past by other organizations.
Before we moved on, we checked with council to make sure that we could do this.
No, I'm sure that you can, because you already rent to CCD after the precedent has been standard, and you do for one, you do for all. I'm just trying to understand the process for this particular church. And CCD is, well, it's what I knew it as a kid, but it's the Sunday, instead of having Sunday school for Catholics, I have it on a Wednesday or Thursday after school. When I grew up, the kids actually went to the church. They don't go, sorry. Who drafted the permit agreement, and when was it last updated? The permit, they signed a permit, they don't sign a lease.
They signed a contract.
If you want to call it a contract.
Well, it's a lease.
Says permit agreement on the top of it. So I'm just curious, who drafted it and how long has it been standing in this general format? And has it been updated or reviewed recently?
Our board council with Liquid Church composed it, and it was agreed to by both parties with the terms and conditions.
So it's not a standard agreement that you use with all renters?
No.
Okay. Did the board review the agreement before it was signed?
Yes.
The whole board?
Well, everyone had access to it, that wanted it to review as much as they so chose.
Okay. Did any of the board members have any changes to it?
I have to ask board council if
Okay.
Can you,
sure.
Where you're going with this?
No, just curious. I'm just wondering if there were any changes, because there are some things that I personally would have changed. And so council reviewed, okay. Was then a market analysis done to set the rate for the rental? Because it seems awfully low to me for the amount of space that they're using in the building.
We have a fee schedule through policy.
So the answer is no.
The answer is we have a
We
Yeah,
have
but he, but it's not a current market analysis for the rental of that square footage. Who determined the amount of the liability assurance for the renter or leasee? Was that council?
Part of policy. Stated in the policy.
Policy, okay. And was there any discussion between the Board of Ed and local church about securing the building after services? I've seen pictures of the building wide open, the front doors when they're done. You have, okay. Thank you.
My name is Alicia Valmiro. I live at 1 Sylvan Place. I just have a general question about security in the schools. I have 2 children at Spring Garden, and the principal this year is new, so I've already had conversations with her, and very happy to say that she's already begun making some changes, and I'm just curious as if that's uniform across the board to all of the grammar schools. The reason I bring it up is there was an incident last year with my children where they were released after school from the office inappropriately. I spoke with then Superintendent Zara at the time and then Principal Clerico. Those 2 are now gone. The person who did release my children is still working in the school. So I guess I'm just trying to make sure that these things don't happen again and that they are the same, like I said, across the board through all of the schools.
Coming to you, one of the things that we've been briefing the board about, I should say publicly, we've been doing security reviews. We have a security team. We'll be sitting down with every single plan, certainly want uniformity of expectations. Not every school is identical. I don't know exactly what the issue that you're talking about.
Well, I know it has to be like grade specific and age specific. I mean, understandably, what's good for the high school is not good for the
There are state guidelines and models that we're supposed to follow.
Okay, because, well, I mean, I can explain to you at another time. I don't want to waste the board's time with what had happened, but my children were essentially released after school, after I received a phone call that they weren't kicked out to somebody that nobody could identify. So, in my mind, as a parent, it was a huge problem. I have nieces in the district at other schools. I don't know if Washington School follows the same policies as Spring Garden. And I'm not talking, we all practice for like the big one, the, God forbid, Columbine, I know the lockdown drills, and we're all ready for that. I'm talking about the day-to-day, what happens before school, releasing for lunch, and releasing after school.
One of the things we've gone over are those specific procedures, and they're set, that's what you're talking about again in the past, but that's certainly not a procedure. So we also want to make sure we have training and principals are communicating with their staff, so we're following the procedures that are.
So who's in charge of this thing? Like, who should I address my concerns to?
Yeah, and we can talk after the show.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
James Quinn, 88 Murrow. I just wanted to say Washington School has not had a student council for a long time. I think it's a great idea. If funding is needed, PTO is willing to help out.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Evening, Mr. President. Alan Thomas, 108 McKinley Street. Mr. President, again, I wish to again compliment the superintendent on his splendid reports tonight, and particularly in the hiring of, or soon to be posting, of a director of instruction for a computing program, as well as district communication. I am reminded that in 1983, the United States Secretary of Education issued a report called A Nation in Crisis, or Education in Crisis, where he described Americans' public schools as being that, if imposed by a foreign power, we would consider it an act of war. And it has been over 30 years, almost 30 years, since that report. And in fact, it was the subject of a program my wife and I attended, and she is listening to that, and the statistics that are still coming out of our schools 30 years after Secretary Bell's report. And I looked at her, and I will say the same thing to you, and you wonder why I get so angry when I talk about education. Because things like having a director of that we're going to now have is something that school districts should have been putting in place 15 to 20 years ago at a minimum. And here it is, 2011, and we're just now getting around to it. That is why our schools are still falling behind. As wonderful as our students are, as wonderful as our staff are, we are still falling behind the rest of the world. And until we start making decisions like this, we are going to continue to fall further and further behind. So again, I applaud the superintendent, I applaud the Board of Education, and I can't wait to see it all get into fruition.
Anyone else?
Hi, good evening. My name is Linda Palma. I live at 119 Church Street. I'm here in regards to the pay-to-pay policy in the Nutley High School. We're paying for our children to participate in sports, but the funds that are being collected are being paid to the Nutley Board of Ed. Now, I was told that the funds are going directly to the Board of Ed and they can allocate it for any other purpose if they see fit. Now, can't those funds be put into a special account for the Nutley Board of Ed? I mean, for the Nutley High School, for the sports department?
I think that they are either directly or indirectly, they are being used to support the sports, in that when we were formulating the budget for this current school year, the question was whether we cut the sports further or not, and introduce this pay to participate. And the decision was to have pay to participate so that we would not have to cut the sports. So in effect, that money is going to support the athletic programs.
Is it all going to support
Yes.
it? Is it a special fund set up for just the high school? Because
No.
that's what it's being collected for.
No, well, there is separate line items in the budget for the high school athletic activities, and those were the ones that would have been cut. We spend almost $1 million on it, and we would have had to have cut a couple $100,000 out of there if we had not done the pay to participate.
Okay, so this money for the pay to play is going only to the Nutley High School Athletic Department, which it is being collected for? Yes or no?
It's like when you get paid and your salary does only go to, a certain amount goes for food, a certain amount goes for
If you
mortgage.
budget, yes.
And we budget, and yes, so we did budget, and we have line items for athletics, and that is used to support that line.
My point is, when it was collected or when it was brought to the public, they weren't told that it was not going just to the Nutley High School Athletic Department. They were told that that's all it was going to, not to the general Board of Ed budget.
Legally, I don't think legally it can't go to a specific account. It can go to our general fund, which is the Nutley Board of Education Fund. We then allocate it, as we have given the direction to the superintendent and the business administrator, to allocate it as needed, and certainly where it is needed is back in to make sure that our athletic program is being funded properly. But legally, it cannot go into a high school athletic team or into a Franklin School athletic team. It needs to go back into our general budget and then is distributed out of there.
But it's being collected only for the kids that are playing in the Nutley High School, the sports program. That's what you're asking the public to pay for. So it's an additional tax for the Board of Ed.
Yes, realistically, it is being collected specifically for your children to participate in sports.
But it's not only going for that, it's going for other things also. It's only going.
We don't collect revenue by line item, we spend it by line item, and the board sat down in the spring and determined to spend $118 on sports when we knew we only had $100 to spend. So as we collect that $18 through the year, know that it doesn't sit in an account, it goes into the general fund. At the same time, it's fulfilling the $18 we told Mr. Pyro he would have to spend to run his program. If we don't collect it, it also would come out of there in the case we have to cut. Say we raise 9 and not 18, well then Mr. Pyro would have to cut $9 worth of what he was going to spend his money on. And so while it's not a direct line accounting-wise, when it comes into the pot, we only have a set revenue every year. And this is, so when the money comes in, we basically tell you where we're spending the money by how much we put into the specific accounts. And when we budgeted for athletics as a board, we budgeted with the assumption that there would be extra revenue generated through this Pay to Participate program to a certain amount. That money, as it came in, would allow us to run the program the way we budgeted the program to run. So it is, it's not in theory, it is supporting a hole that needs to be filled in order to run the program the way we said it would be run.
All right, is there any way of telling if there's extra money left over and where that money would go to? Would it go to the following year for the high school department, or would it go maybe, let's say, 1 year if we got money left over, we could put some lights on the old one, you know? So
In this year's budget, there will be no money left over because we know that we had a void of $140,000 in our athletic program, and the $200 that you're paying, that the parents are paying, with the amount of students that we have there and the calculations we did ahead of time, we will collect $140,000 to fill that hole. That could change next year, but this year there will be no extra money collected from the parents that will be able to subsidize next year or go to something else. It'll only be used to fill the hole that we have.
all right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask that the ad hoc procurement committee make their motion tonight. I found the explanations given by some of the board members, such as what the evaluation committee should do, whether they should make recommendations or not. I think that could be done in the initial resolution going forward on RFP, and do that on a case-by-case basis, not a big deal. And certainly getting recommendations from committees on what to do is not anything unusual about the Board of Education. All of the committees make their recommendations known to the full board all the time, and then the full board votes on whether to accept those recommendations or not. I agree there probably should not be one or two, just one recommendation necessarily, but what they think is best, I don't think is all that much too difficult for the board to handle as a whole. Same thing with the not to exceed. This is how everybody in the real world does it. Okay?
And I think that we all are accepting the not to exceed and the explanations that were provided.
Yeah. And therefore, I don't see why this cannot be made board practice tonight by the passage of a resolution that I know has already been written and that the board has probably already seen. I find that referring one committee's recommendation to another committee, I don't recall that being part of the charge when this ad hoc committee was formed last May, Mr. President. As I recall, the charge was to produce a policy recommendation, and if that's what this committee has done, that's what this board should be starting to vote upon. Anything less than that, I would consider to be an attempt to stall for reasons I cannot discern. If you're talking about a few drafting problems here, I think that can be resolved very promptly, perhaps in the executive session you're about to go into. But we have been waiting for years for this type of initiative from Board of Education members. And why we're going to now send it to another committee is very much concerns me, Mr. President. And I just want to voice those concerns. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not, I'll close this portion of the meeting. Any old business?
I don't know if it's under Alderman. I know we mentioned the prior meeting regarding the cafeteria, our food service. So I don't know if it's under old or new, but I would like to see if we can get them to someone make a presentation to this board. Because I've had a lot of questions on new formats, paying for 2 weeks in advance, I don't know anything, and I would love to be informed. And I think from now on, when something does change, I think this board needs to know. I think they can come and make a presentation, explain it to us, and then let us make a decision if we are entitled to about a procedure being changed. Because I've gotten bombarded with unhappy people about this procedure of 2 weeks paying. If you don't talk for 2 weeks, then you're stuck with peanut butter and jelly. There's a lot of stories going on, and I'd like to know the truth and facts so we can do something.
Secretary, I support that. Just Mr. Rizzo.
In response to what Mr. Sposato said, I thought we were informed of the upcoming changes to the food service program a few months back, that this was already implemented in the middle school level, and it was being brought down to the grammar school levels.
Two different issues. I think this is two different issues.
Paying for our lunch in advance, and is that what that was thinking about? Pardon me?
Picking the menu out in advance if you're going to have those things.
In the junior high schools, money into the account. In the grammar schools, they're making them order the food and pay for it 2 weeks out ahead, picking the meals.
Yes,
That's
I
not the
understand
truth in
that.
junior high school.
But I thought that we were prepped with this knowledge that this was coming a few months back. Am I wrong in
Did I
that?
miss that meeting?
I know as a parent, we all received a nice little like FAQ kind of thing, and maybe we need to share that with the board. I can't remember if I got it as a parent or got it as a board member. Yeah, so.
That is a parent, because that's how I heard
Something
it.
right, Karen? Yeah.
So just maybe they can come and just talk to us. That's all.
Any other business? Any new business?
And I have three things, so I don't know if only you wanted to go back, but three. One is to thank Mr. Lazarevich for all the proposals he put forward tonight. We did each one prior to doing it tonight. Our goals, I think it's great. I think it gives us goalposts to reach, and I'm glad to be working on it with you, so I thought they were great. They did a great job in presenting them also tonight. Number two, I'd like to talk about Pink Week here at Walker Middle School. You know, this was Pink Week. They raised money for Pink Week, I'm sorry, but they call it Pink Week. They were for the Susan Coleman Walk. The students that were involved with Student Council, they worked their lunch hours and other programs to sell pencils and pink bands to the students throughout the school on their lunch hours and all. They raised over $300, and I'd like to ask that you and Mr. Lazarevich just send a letter from the both of you to the Student Council here, commending them for raising the money for that. If that's okay. But I thought it was a great program. The kids did it on their own. And the third thing is, just to finish up on the recommendation of that resolution, that I'm not going to move it forward tonight, but I'd like to ask that it's on the next committee for the academic to review, to come back to the board in the future. Administrative.
And
I
you are
apologize.
meeting soon, so.
I do apologize. It's on next administrative.
Yes.
So it can come back to the board in the future,
Yes.
that's all. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business?
I just wanted, I didn't have an opportunity to brief the board about our meeting with the knapsack committee, the group, the 31 parents that are together for autistic children in the district. And I just wanted to report some news to you all, and I could do it in more detail, but I just haven't had a chance to reduce to my notes to writing yet. But I just wanted, I attended their meeting a few weeks ago, and Art Monaco attended as well. And overall, the parents had a positive experience with the first few days of school, first few months, which I think was good to hear. They identified a few areas to be addressed, and I think Art Monaco is going to be working on it. And one issue that kept coming up was this issue of behaviorist, so it's something to be mindful of in the upcoming school year. They did talk about the summer program, about how they like that they have it because it allows their children who are resistant to change and who need that consistency throughout the year to continue. However, it's only 20 days long. So they wanted to maybe talk to the school district about maybe extending it in a way, maybe a 4-day week, I don't know. They feel like their kids regress so quickly, and they were concerned that the extended school year doesn't really address that concern, so it's something they wanted to talk about. They have some concerns with the aides. They really want to be kept up to date about that. I think so I think as a board we need to continue to look at that area and see if it's how we spend our money, what makes more sense for our kids rather than the bottom line. I think is what they're concerned with.
You said age, you mean therapists?
Yes.
They talked about technology for the students. So I guess with technology being the topic of today, it's good that we're moving in that area as a district. And they also indicated that Commissioner Scarpelli is working with them with this, in getting them iPads for some students, which is a great asset that we have in our community that we need to embrace. It's nice to see our community leaders stepping up and helping out in that way. They talked about transportation issues, and this is an interesting area. They talked about proficiency testing. They want their kids tested, and they feel like their kids aren't always tested to really see where they're going. Like taking standardized tests, they want to be. But just so you know, and in fact, we talked a lot about them today. They're eager to have your kids tested. So I thought that was interesting information. Assessed. They said proficiency testing. I wrote it down. I don't know. They didn't say they wanted to be competent. The competencies either. They didn't come. The out-of-district students, the kids that get sent out, they want to be incorporated within the community, the school community in a way. They don't know what's going on. They want their kids to be able to come to the school dance. So I don't know if we can reach out to the PTOs and try to have the PTOs reach out to them or set up somewhere where they know what's going on in their home school. That was one of their concerns. And then finally was about their concern with the special services position that's probably, I anticipate would be posting this year, special services director. And they would be eager and interested in assisting us in any way in helping with that process. So those, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Just a quick comment regarding Mr. Thomas and Mr. Scalera regarding our recommendations for the procurement committee. There does definitely seem to be a consensus among the board members that this is the direction that the board needs to take. So that being said, I'm going to work closely with Trustees Scalera and Flynn to modify and address those concerns regarding those recommendations. And this is an issue that I brought to the board's attention when I became a board member a year and a half ago, that I did introduce this report, that I did feel that it belonged in this policy. That being said, we're going to iron out the differences, whatever compromise, but there will be a resolution at our next board meeting making this a policy. I can promise you that. I will put forward that motion, and we'll see where it takes us, okay? So thank you for that.
Any other new business? I just want to mention, it was mentioned earlier, we'll be meeting with the commissioners on November 1st. It's the same evening that we have our own regular board meeting, and the mayor has asked how many will be attending. If there is anyone who cannot attend, please let me know afterwards.
What time are we meeting, 5:30?
5 o'clock. That meeting will be at 5 and go 5 to 6 probably, because that meeting at 6:30 at the town hall.
Nice to be retired.
At the town hall, with the commissioners is at town hall. The other, and I spoke to Mr. Stiller and Mr. Kaczynski, they are looking forward to being board representatives to the Nutley Education Foundation. They do meet this Thursday, I believe. I know Charles.
This Thursday, about 10 o'clock at night, tomorrow back.
They meet at 7 o'clock. Again, right now the meeting looks iffy in my mind because a couple people can't make it. So,
can we get an email list when we send it out? I can try and prepare for the
I'll forward it. Yeah, it should be the third Thursday.
They'll send it for you.
Great.
Very quickly, on our board assignments this year, I'm noticing that we don't have a backup or alternate for some of those assignments. What is the procedure that you would like us to follow if we can't make a meeting or event?
I guess either you call me or if you have somebody in mind.
Call other board members. Mr. Kaczynski called him on that. I can cover it.
Any other new business? If not, whereas the Board of Education will be discussing matters exempt from public discussion pursuant to NJSA 10:4-12, now therefore be resolved that the Board of Education recess and close executive session at this time to discuss student matters. Be it further resolved that the results of the discussion made public by inclusion on the agenda of the subsequent meeting of the Board of Education, when the reasons for discussing such matters in closed session no longer exist. So all in favor? Aye. Okay, we will return from executive session and adjourn with formal action.